Hey everybody, Homeslice Henry here, and if I sound a little different in this video, that's because I'm recording this while in Anaheim, California at the Pokemon Go World Championships. And while here, we just received massive new information about the new season of Go Battle League that's going to be arriving to the game early in September. Not only are there massive changes across the board, tons of new Pokemon learning new attacks, but also a lot of adjustments as well. I will say, after a full day of cheering on the competitors, my voice is very hoarse, but I'm still going to try and cover these changes as best as I can to get the news out as quickly as possible. And as you may have seen from looking at the screen, they're starting off strong by lowering the switch timer 5 additional seconds. One of the biggest additions of skill gap that they added to the game was last September, which was when they adjusted the switch timer from 60 seconds to 50 seconds. This made the game far more dynamic than it ever was because you have a greater ability to solve the switch timer, desync switch timers, catch moves, and play your way out of bad matchups. And they're taking a swing at it again. They're lowering it from 50 seconds to 45 seconds. This is a massive, massive win in my book, as that means you're going to be stuck in bad matchups for less time, and could potentially even allow, because each charge attack that's thrown burns about 10 seconds off the switch timer, potentially you may even be able to escape a bad matchup after only 3 total charge moves, instead of currently, in which 4 have to be thrown. So right off the bat, even without seeing any of the updates, I am ecstatic over this change to the switch timer. Now that I have covered the changes to the switch timer, let's talk about the attack changes. First up is Aura Sphere, a 20 damage reduction in power, but also a pretty significant energy cost decrease. Next up, Body Slam is getting a buff, 5 extra damage. Weather Ball, and this is all types of Weather Ball, get a 5 damage buff as well. And now Charm. Charm is getting a damage nerf, a pretty significant one, but energy generation increased to make it a less degen fast move oriented move. Next up, Confusion, a strict buff, energy generation increased. Breaking Swipe is getting more expensive, but will have a guaranteed chance to lower the opponent's attack. Dragon Breath is getting reworked. Less damage, more energy generation, likely to now be a Dragon-type Psywave clone. Dragon Claw gets a massive increase in power, but also more expensive. Dragon Pulse getting less expensive. Dragon Tail, a massive reduction in damage, but also an increase in energy generation. So right off the bat, this seems like the season of dragons. Next up, Aerial Ace, 5 more damage but energy cost increase, probably a slight nerf. Drill Peck, a strict buff, 5 extra damage. For Peck, a pretty bad fast move, energy generation increased. It really needs all the help that it can get. Sky Attack is getting its energy cost decreased at the cost of 10 less damage. Ember, dramatic decrease in power but energy generation increase, which means Charizard might be back. Flame Wheel gets 20 more damage and a lower energy cost, a big rework. Weather Ball Fire, 5 extra damage. Gyro Ball, energy cost decreased. If this is down to 50, then Aegislash is going to be a monster next season, having the ability to double up. It obviously could still be 55. Steel Wing is getting a nerf, probably to make sure that Corviknight and Skarmory do not run that move. Leafage getting an energy generation buff. Leafage should be very strong. Seed Bomb, is Seed Bomb back to what it was? Less damage, less energy. That's pretty nice. Rock Slide, a buff. 10 extra damage. A smackdown buff. Buffing Bastiodon, not what I like to see. Weather Ball, increase in damage. Scorching Sands, I'm a huge fan of this one. Scorching Sands debuff chance is going to be lowered, probably from 30 to 20. Volt Switch getting a pretty big buff from 12 to 14 power, so a plus 2 damage to Volt Switch. Water Pulse, energy cost decreased. Weather Ball, we've already seen this a few different times for the different typings. 5 extra damage. There is the Weather Ball Ice as well, 5 extra damage. And now we move to the attack availability updates. What new moves are Pokemon learning? First of all, Salamence gets its cheapest ever move in Brutal Swing. Incineroar gets Brutal Swing, so Incineroar now has a very cheap move. Turtonator gets its first ever bait move. That's going to be 2-2-2-1. for Incinerate pacing the Brutal Swing. Shelgon gets Crunch. It obviously has reworked Dragon Breath. Salamence also gets Crunch. So Salamence getting a lot of potential options. Garchomp gets a real bait move in Breaking Swipe, although obviously Breaking Swipe's getting reworked. Turtonator gets Dragon Claw. Torkoal gets its first bait move in the reworked Flame Wheel. Altaria gets coverage with Flamethrower. Metal Sound Empoleon. Steel Wing got nerfed, but Empoleon gets a new fast move. Como O Metal Sound, I'm incredibly excited for. Fearow gets Drill Peck. Fearow also does learn Peck. Dodrio now learns Peck. Xatu now learns Peck. Togekiss now learns Peck. So for Togekiss, something like Peck, Psyshock, and the reworked Aura Sphere could be incredibly interesting. And Charizard keeps a 35 energy move with Air Cutter. Alolan Raichu gets Psyshock. That's really nice for Raichu. Xatu gets Psyshock. Galarian Slowking gets a true bait move with Psyshock. Victini gets Psyshock as well. Delphox gets Psyshock. Aromatisse also gets Psyshock. I believe that's Aromatisse's cheapest move as well. Druddigon gets coverage. Rock Tomb, and obviously the rework to Dragon Tail. Tyrunt gets Rock Tomb. Tyrantrum gets Rock Tomb. Hakamo'o's first coverage move in Rock Tomb. Rock Record Crustle is something people have wanted for a very long time, and now it finally happens. Flygon gets Sand Tomb. Crocodile gets Sand Tomb. Nidoqueen gets Mud Slap. So unfortunately, a new slapper has hit the field, and a second new slapper has hit the field, as Torterra also gets Mud Slap. Pachirisu gets his first non-electric move with the normal move Hyper Voice. Kingdra learns Swift, so Kingdra's terrible pacing is finally fixed. Dodrio gets Trailblaze. Como-O gets Upper Hand, so it no longer has to run close combat. Raikou gets Aura Sphere. Celebi buffed Confusion, and now a coverage move into the Steels with Aura Sphere. Latias gets its cheapest move ever with Aura Sphere. Latios also gets Aura Sphere, so some Steel coverage for those dragons. Jirachi also gets Aura Sphere, which is very cool. Slowbro gets Drain Punch. I believe a bunch of Pokemon here get Drain Punch. Drain Punch currently is obviously quite bad, but this obviously opens the door to a potential Drain Punch buff in future seasons. We've seen them do this a few times. So I'm not going to list all of the Drain Punch mons. They're obviously on screen. Drain Punch is probably not going to be a move worth considering for this season, but it kind of sets the stage for potential move updates for December. Incineroar, my goodness. Incineroar getting a lot of love here, and I am ecstatic to announce that Venusaur is getting Sludge. Venusaur finally gets a true bait move. Dragonite gets Thunder Punch. And that is the complete list of all the changes that are coming to Pokemon Go Battle League early in September. Now that we have all of this information, I do kind of want to give some initial thoughts on certain Pokemon that I'm excited for. Obviously, there's no way I'm going to be able to cover every Pokemon that is affected by these changes, as there's so many changes. But I just want to highlight a few Pokemon that, I'm pretty excited about. The first one we're going to be talking about is Charizard. Charizard obviously got a buff this season with Ember, but that wasn't what it needed. Charizard at its peak was all about energy generation. It was just faster. The moment you got a small energy head start, Charizard could run away with games. Well, with the big rework to Ember, and it's way less damage, but increased energy generation, we might be at 665 Blast Burn territory, which would be incredible. We know Blast Burn, it's an unbelievably effective move. Even when it's resisted, it hits very hard. So getting really good pacing on that is nice. Now, the downside to Charizard would be the fact that Dragon Claw is obviously getting more expensive, but that is where Air Cutter can be very clutch. Air Cutter, while not having the greatest damage per energy, will still allow Charizard to have an incredibly cheap bait move, something that it really likes to be able to grab shields and then connect with those devastating blast burns. Another Pokemon, coincidentally also a fire type that I do want to talk about, is Turtonator. Turtonator is a fire and dragon type, so a very cool typing. It is one of the only dragons that straight up beats Dedenne, and my goodness, is Turtonator getting love in this update. Turtonator already has Incinerate, so it's off to an amazing start, but the biggest issue with Turtonator, it never had bait moves. Its moves were clunky, expensive, and this is where they've aimed to adjust that this season. Brutal Swing is being given to Turtonator, as well as Dragon Claw, which is obviously getting reworked to be more expensive and do a lot more damage, and Dragon Pulse is getting cheaper. So now Turtonator will have a lot of options. Turtonator can potentially run something like Incinerate, Brutal Swing, which would be 2-2-2-1 pacing, and then Overheat if it wants a nuke. If it wants Dragon coverage, it can potentially opt for Dragon Claw or Dragon Pulse, depending on after the reworks to both moves, which move ends up feeling like it has better synergy. But giving an Incinerate user a 35 energy move, I believe this is the first time that has ever happened. And that means that, yes, it will have a one cycle. And I'm very excited to have a potential dragon in the meta that performs so differently to any other dragon we've ever seen and can be a dragon that can shut down Dedenne due to the fact that it does have that very nice electric resist while not being weak to fairy. Since we went from talking about a fire flying type to a fire dragon type, it seems only fitting that the next Pokemon I talk about is a dragon flying type, and that is Altaria. Altaria once absolutely dominated the skies in the Great League, but a bunch of nerfs to Sky Attack made Altaria a lot more difficult to use. This season not only aims to give Altaria coverage, but it aims to give it its pacing back. The Dragon Breath rework means that Altaria will still do decent fast move damage, but get to charge attacks faster, which was one of its big issues. Now add to that the fact that Sky Attack, while having a reduction in power, is also going to be cheaper. That means that Altaria will actually be able to make moves. Part of why Altaria was so devastatingly effective at its peak was its massive bulk. It could take hits while other Pokemon could not. So giving better pacing to something that has really good bulk should represent a very nice buff for Altaria. Now, I haven't even mentioned the other buffs to Altaria because somehow this Pokemon is receiving 4 adjustments. It already learns Dragon Pulse, a move that is getting less expensive, and it's getting a move for the very first time, Flamethrower, which means Altaria will have coverage into the steals. So I'm not saying that Altaria into Tinkaton will now be a dominant matchup for the Altaria, but it at least will be able to hit back for super effective damage. So all in all, I think things are looking up for Altaria in a massive way. Now I could go on and on, there's so many Pokemon affected by these changes, but the final one I'll talk about today is going to be Como-O. Como-O already has Clanging Scales, which is arguably the best move in the game. It is unbelievably efficient. But Como-O's moveset was always very awkward. But now with Dragon Tail being a more energy-focused move, it can get to those moves faster, and they gave it a coverage move as a fast move, Metal Sound. Add to that the fact that it's now getting Upper Hand, and Upper Hand gives it a pretty solid fighting move that it can use, because currently its options were Brick Break, a move that does almost no damage, or Close Combat, a devastatingly effective move, but one that lowers your defense by 2 stages, meaning that if you fire off the Close Combat, you can't really stay on the field with Como-O. But Upper Hand should give Como-O extra consistency, and now with the option to run Metal Sound, Poison Jab, or the reworked Dragon Tail, I honestly think that Como-O could end up feeling like a bit of a Swiss Army knife. With Metal Sound, at the very least, if that ends up being the option people go for, Metal Sound would give it a way to hit for super effective damage into fairies, or even something like an Azumarill at the very least, it could hit for neutral. So I'm very excited. The few Pokemon that I've mentioned so far are some of the ones that stood out to me right away. Let me know down in the comments. What are you most excited about with this update? I know we didn't see the Mud Slap nerf and the Parabolic Charge nerf that I was hoping for, but I believe a lot of the updates that they added can hopefully make the Parabolic Charge users feel less threatening this season, as there are more things that can hunt them down. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, congratulations. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I don't have my typical outro today because I am away from my setup, but I'm very much excited for the new season. I will be back from my trip at some point on Monday, and then from there, I can start to take a deeper dive into what the meta could look like and work on a full meta analysis. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I've been Home Slice Henry.